Hey, welcome back to the C Space Studio here at CES 2025. I'm James Kotecki, and joining me right now is Ann Frisbie, Head of Global Business Development at AdsWizz's. Welcome to the C Space Studio.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so AdsWizz's, let's define for people what that is. You're powering the monetization of audio. You're part of Sirius XM. Give us a bit more detail on what you're up to.
Sure. So AdsWizz's is the audio technology platform for both advertising and content in the audio space. So my customers, or people that use the platform, are Sirius XM itself, obviously the largest audio publisher, and they use the platform 100%, but also a whole host of amazing other audio publishers. So Univision, the New York Times, Rogers, Bauer Media, which is the largest radio broadcaster in Europe. Just a really amazing list of clients that are really good partners for us. And we're really trying to help grow the amount of spending that's happening in audio from an advertising perspective so that we can help creators make money and ultimately have amazing creative for consumers, and we think it helps their lives and is a really great opportunity for marketers.
Yeah, and if you could benchmark it in quantitative or even qualitative terms, like where are we now with the amount of ad spending going on there, and how much opportunity is there out there?
Okay, well, yeah, there is a pretty big gap for audio ad spending between time spent and digital media investment. So,
so in other words, people are listening to a lot of podcasts, but there's not as many ad dollars going as you think.
Yeah, so I mean, listening has really been on the rise. Obviously, there's been great content, so people love it. But there's only about 9% of digital media spending going to audio, when probably about 30% of time spent is on audio content. So we think there's a really big opportunity. But we've also come a long way to actually give a viable business model for audio creators already from an advertising perspective. So,
what do you think is behind that gap? What is there a perception that needs to change? Is there mentality?
So it's interesting. I actually think that we're pretty obsessed with television in America, even compared to outside of the US. So in Europe, I find things to be a little bit different, where and maybe because the Queen's address was done by radio, maybe because the culture started well before television. I think that audio experiences are still a little bit more front and center from a media planning perspective. And the radio broadcast space, even outside of digital, is still quite strong and healthy in Europe in comparison to here in the US. I think in the US, the digital space has also really focused so much on CTV and trying to move that, $50 billion from linear TV into digital, that it's taken up a lot of thinking and resources. But we obviously are seeing audio spend grow pretty significantly, and I think that will continue.
And that's an interesting idea, because when you think about content, some content may be moved from linear, where at least in people's habits, moved from linear to connected TV, whereas podcasting, and I'm just totally spitballing here, so this could be completely wrong, but podcasting, a lot of like net news shows, right? Things that would never have, it's not like you just ported radio over into podcasting. It's stuff that never would have been on the radio in the first place. It's all this net news stuff, and maybe that's part of the mentality shift that's happening.
Well, and I do think that podcasting has really opened the eyes for marketers. You now have really big celebrities, both ones that are known, like Jason Bateman and Will Arnett and on SmartList, or new superstars like Ashley Flowers with Crime Junkie that have come up.
Who I believe was here or is here at CES.
Who was here, who have come up and now are part of the zeitgeist, right? They're part of the dinner table discussions where people say, oh, what are you listening to on podcasts, right? So I think that is changing the focus and understanding and awareness from brands, and we have seen significant shift over the last few years of more brand advertisers participating and buying into podcast inventory. So I think it is growing the space for sure.
What's your message for audio creators? I assume you probably talk to different groups, right? But what's your message for the creators when you talk to them as far as what they need to be thinking about for 2025?
Well, I mean, I think one of the key things for us is we are really trying to focus on building out an open and independent ecosystem. We're really taking the opposite strategy of a walled garden. We're enabling the most advanced technology that SiriusXM itself uses, and we're licensing that and allowing competitors and any publishers with whatever business they want to build to use that. And so I think there's a real opportunity for all of us together to grow the space. I don't think it's a competition between audio creators. It's an ability for all of us to really build awareness and really understanding of how much audio performs well from a marketing channel. And so that would be my message. If you aren't part of the AdsWizz's family, I would love, as a creator who's doing great content in audio, I would love you to give us a chance and talk to us,
And what are the biggest programmatic challenges right now that you're working with? Especially, I mean, even things like a host read, right? Where could generative AI somehow programmatically start to do some of those ads, or maybe it already is? Like, where are we right now? What's the cutting edge as far as what programmatic can do?
Yeah, okay, so there was a lot in that question.
Yes, loaded question.
Loaded question. So I'll step back from a timeline standpoint and kind of chunk it out. So any new digital media opportunities, so this happened in search marketing, this happened with social, this happened with digital itself when the first display banners came out. You have about the first 5 years of that inventory being bought by direct response advertisers, because unlike the brands, they're not like, oh, I need third-party measurement, I need third-party tracking, I need IAB. They are like, let me spend $10,000 and see if it works. And you know what? If you sell my product and it's profitable, I will put in millions of dollars.
Hence the promo codes and all of these
and
ads.
so I think that host-read advertising was just extremely, effective from a direct response advertising standpoint, and it funded the creation of a lot of this content, right? We should be appreciative of those advertisers because they take the risk, they get the reward, but they also help us launch these spaces because it takes the brands a while to like get into it, right? I think you now have had more brands, you have this measurement capabilities, you have standardization that's enabled the brands to start participating, and in programmatic is almost a part of that journey, right? Where, so this is a crazy stat. So AdsWizz launched its programmatic offering in the digital audio space 10 years ago. So it's actually quite crazy, and it really took off, I think, initially when Pandora itself began offering its supply to programmatic buyers in 2018. So that's really when the music streaming space really started programmatic. And it was really more similar to kind of in-app programmatic buying. But now, in the last 2-3 years, you've had really premium publishers on the podcast side also putting their supply out for availability. And so that's really kickstarted the growth now, I think, on programmatic buying on the podcast side.
And how has targeting changed and evolved? How precise can you be when you're targeting these ads, and where are we going now?
Oh, yeah, so there's a lot of strategies in place on targeting and changes going on. So we are taking really a two-pronged approach. One of them is to make sure from a platform perspective that we really make it easy to support first-party data. To the extent that a publisher has first-party data or an advertiser has first-party data, we want to make it as easy as possible that they can use that into the space and transact on it. In addition, though, we've invested pretty heavily around contextual targeting. And this really started in the podcast space where the transcripts for the podcast were available, so you could actually build segments off of the full transcripts, right? Rich set of signals, because while we talk about the big shows, there's a lot of niche shows out there about topics that are very precise, right? That give you a really good sense of what mindset a consumer's in. And so we have a long available opportunity from a contextual targeting segments from the podcast side. But this year we also launched mood targeting, which is one of our first forays into contextual targeting on the streaming music side, where you can actually know what are those songs leading into the ad break and what mood does that put the consumer in, and how does that impact my creative, right? Because you don't want to come with this jarring creative when someone's doing meditative music or whatever. So
when I'm listening to death metal, I'm not ready to buy a mattress necessarily.
Exactly, so you can kind of fit the experience. And so we've really seen the increase of the use of contextual targeting,
Is my research right that you went to Georgetown University?
I did.
I did as well. So
no way.
You and I have that in
common.
common.
Okay.
You and I have that in common.
And not probably the same years, but yeah.
Well, I want to ask you this. I want to ask you a Georgetown question because I thought that we could talk about The Exorcist, which is of course the famously
Yes.
said at Georgetown.
Yes.
So The Exorcist is about a demon. Is there a demon that you would like to exorcise from the world of advertising? Is there a demon as far as a mindset
So it's
or something?
funny, I'm like the most positive person in the industry. Like I feel, so I've been in digital media since 1997. And I love this industry. And I've gotten to work on, in my mind, all the fun things. Like I was doing search marketing before Google search ads.
Yeah.
Like I started in mobile in 2008 when the iPhone was launching, right? I don't know what people did in mobile before the iPhone launched, but I got to start with the iPhone. And now I get to do audio in the podcast space. And I work at SiriusXM, which is the behemoth in the audio space with like amazing top talent who really wants to support an open ecosystem. Like I'm a big believer in the open ecosystem. I've never worked at one of the walled gardens. And so is there something I don't like? Gosh, what don't I like? I mean.
I think your answer was indicative though. I think your positivity exercised the demon in and of itself. So I think we can end there. That's fantastic. Ann Frisbie, AdsWizz, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for the time. Really
Thanks for allowing a convoluted Georgetown question. Had to get it in there, folks. Got to have some fun up here in the C Space Studio. I'm James Kotecki. Stay with us. More conversations are just ahead at CES 2025.